Hello and welcome to the Valley. Today I am your host, Janet Michael. We are back on the Zooms today with my friend Les Sinclair. He is the Communications and PR Manager for the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. And Les, you are always great about sending me over some notes about some topics and some things that you want to make sure we touch on during our conversation. And I have to tell you, when you sent me the notes this time and it said May is Older Americans Month, I was like, wait, I just read an article about that. That is fascinating that President Kennedy created this whole thing.
Yeah, we have a lot to owe to the older Americans in our country. We're all standing on the shoulders of great people before us. And so when we get the opportunity to celebrate older Americans, I think we should. They are doing wonderful work, and they also require extra work. Celebrating them and honoring them is a good thing.
We've talked a lot over the last couple of years that we've been doing this show together about volunteers in
Yeah.
particular for food pantries for you at Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. A lot of them are those older Americans. They're senior citizens. Some have retired, but they truly were raised with that foundation of giving back to your community, and being a volunteer was as important to them as having a job and starting a family.
Yeah, there's also a religious aspect to it to some extent, in that older Americans are the ones who are still going to church. Church participation is sliding and slipping, and many of our food pantries are run out of churches. It's over 50% of them. And that means that those are older Americans who are thinking about, oh, gee, how do we give back and in what way, and how do we do that under the guise of our faith. There's also a bit of a challenge there too, because they are aging out. And so as they get older, you think about an 80-year-old who might need to move a 50-pound bag of rice or all of the cans. And so we do our best to help support them in other ways along that tract as well, to make sure that they have things like electric pallet jacks and that sort of thing, so that they can move it around, because they too are aging out. But it really is a predominance of retired people and older Americans who are doing a lot of this volunteer work for us.
I really admire the fact that while they are doing a lot of that volunteer work, they are also a pretty large part of the people that you serve. 1 in 5 seniors come to a food pantry at some point because they're living on a fixed income. They don't have all of these other things that we as the younger generations have access to because of our age.
Yeah, and so many of them would work again. I talked to a 70-year-old truck driver who had a heart attack at work. And so he was no longer allowed to work. He has a heart condition. He's 70 some years old, can't do it, not allowed. He would go out and get another job if he could to help make ends meet. He cannot do it. And that poses a challenge for someone that is not only has a lot of pride and has worked hard all their lives, but it also means that he must live on that fixed income. And so when things like the gasoline prices that have gone through the roof recently, when they change, he can't adapt. It's not like he can go get a part-time job at the 7-Eleven, because he's not physically allowed to do that. So he's in a situation where he has to make ends meet, and he has to stretch his budget as small as it might be.
Do you think that the age of a lot of the people, the senior population that are frequenting food pantries, do you think that's why so many of them have had to pivot now to also offer transportation services where they're delivering food to some of these seniors?
I think there's a lot of that. As people age, they become less capable of driving. But there are many seniors who are living on these fixed incomes. I talked to a couple back during the Snowmageddon event, and it was after that. And he was telling me that they were both retired, and he was saying that his driveway, he was in Nelson County, his driveway is the size of 2 football fields. So he had to shovel out 2 football fields of ice and snow in order to get to a food pantry. They do all of their errands for the month at one time. So they take one day and they do all of their errands. They go to the grocery store, they pick up their prescriptions, they do everything that they have to do, including going to the mobile food pantry of the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, so that they can make sure that they have enough food for the month, because everything costs them so much more and it's harder and harder to live.
When I was doing a little bit of research into that, doing that deep dive into Older Americans Month, I learned that they typically pick a theme. There is an organization that does this, and they typically pick a theme. The theme for 2026 is Champion Your Health, which I thought was also interesting because a lot of what you do at the food bank is we've talked in the past about food as medicine. That
Yeah.
is a huge thing that you guys focus on.
Yeah, at the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, we distributed over 32 million pounds of food last fiscal year. We're already on track in the first half to distribute more than that. We're at 16.6 million pounds in the first half of this fiscal year. But 5.5 million of that is produce. And that is really high quality fruits and vegetables that people need to sustain their life and help them thrive. With the right diet, a person can manage chronic illnesses, high blood pressure, kidney disease, that sort of thing. There are folks who need high protein. There are folks who need low salt. There are folks who need low sugar. All of these diseases, these chronic illnesses, can be managed with the proper diet. And so, if we can provide the right kind of food to people, they can not only have a wonderful grocery list, if you will, but also they can live longer, they can thrive, they can get through their life much better, and their healthcare costs are not only lower for themselves but for the community as a whole.
We should do a whole show on food as medicine, quite frankly. That would be, I should bring you and Jason Craig from Valley Health into the mix, and the three of us should just have a serious conversation about food as medicine because I think it's one of the most misunderstood types of programs or just misunderstood information that's out there.
Yeah, and we are working with many healthcare clinics throughout the community that people come in for dialysis or blood pressure checks, all sorts of things like that. And they are screened for food insecurity. If they need food, they leave the clinic with food provided by the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank that meets their dietary requirements. And those things are really, really important to keeping people healthier, longer, and thriving in a way that they might not normally if they didn't have access to the right foods.
When we talked the last time, our show focused a little bit around the numbers. So when we talk about the numbers where the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank is concerned, you're on a fiscal year that starts July 1st and this June will end that year. So you're in fourth quarter for
Mhm.
the most part. How are those numbers looking overall? Because we just got through a pretty cold winter where we've talked heat or eat. There have been a lot of changes in the last 6, 8 months to our economy. What are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, we're really surprised and dismayed at the continued increase of numbers. Last fiscal is 171,200 guest visits on average visiting our partners and our programs at the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. The first half of this fiscal year, we are now seeing about 177,000. We saw 194,000 in October of last year. That had a lot to do with the government shutdown, the uncertainty with SNAP. There was a lot going on in October, and that uncertainty feeds people their desire to go to a food pantry because they're afraid they won't have enough food. So they seek out food in advance and make sure that they have it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is what we are here for. We help people get through. We're the bridge from where they are to where they need to be.
We talked early on about how during the pandemic you hit, I think you said 140,000,
Yeah.
144,000 a month, and
Yeah.
you thought that was the peak. And now we're sitting here at 177,000. I'm a little concerned about where we're going to be when you and I talk again in 2 months.
Yeah, we are too, actually. We're looking at this. Now, we're going to be around. We don't have a concern about that. Our community supports us. So the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank will be here. But it is getting harder and harder for our partners to serve these folks. And USDA is down. USDA is a product that is delivered to the food bank for free. And that means that our partners get that for free. So it's a very good, reliable, nutritious source of food. But it's down 31% this year. And that means that we have to purchase more food in order to fill that gap. Now, purchase food, the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, our partners pay 75 cents on the dollar of what we pay. So we support that with the 25% cost share. But there are smaller pantries that don't have the budget to make up for the loss of USDA food. So we at the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank are actually working to make sure that they have the food that they need. We've given financial credits to about 120 pantries so they can fill the gap in that supply when the TFAP food is limited. We also spent almost $700,000, or will in the coming months, on about 400,000 pounds of high quality, culturally inclusive proteins like chicken and fish and peanut butter and beef to support our pantry. So they'll get that for free as well. Typically, anything that the food bank gets for free, our partners get for free. There are some other items that our partners get for free, culturally inclusive items, and produce is always free. But they then have to purchase some of the other items to fill the gap. And if their budgets aren't big enough to support that, then they either go without or we can help supplement like we're doing now.
It really is a good partnership that you have with these food pantries, because I sense that many of them wouldn't be able to exist at all, certainly not to the degree that they do now, if they didn't have that collaboration and that partnership with you.
Yeah, and we could not do what we do without them. This is a collaborative effort. Our partners are essentially the front lines. They're the ones seeing most of the guests. We have our own programs too, but it's really the partners who are making the difference here. And so it's important that we support them. We have a thing called a Partner Innovation and Impact Grant, and we buy them things like electric pallet jacks, sometimes technology. We'll buy them walk-in freezers that store frozen items, or walk-in coolers or refrigerators so that they can store produce. So it really is a collaborative effort. The membership with the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, also for a very nominal fee, it's like $50 a year, gets them access to hundreds of thousands of free food. Hundreds of thousands of dollars and pounds of free food.
Let's take a break. When we come back, you just mentioned having some programs. You have programs that are specifically designed for older Americans to serve seniors. Senior food boxes is one. Can you tell me a little bit about some of those programs in the next segment?
You bet.
We're on the Zooms today with Les Sinclair. He is the communications and PR manager for the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. This is an ongoing series where we talk with Les every other month. Later in the year, we'll get to have a conversation with him every single month. But for now, we're going to take a break and come back and talk more about their programs in just a couple of minutes.
Wherever there's a need in our communities, there's a United Way. Improving lives so everyone can thrive. Where more people can gain access to healthcare and nutritious food for their tables. Where more community members can benefit from financial education and get connected to local resources for housing support. And where children are given more chances to reach their full potential. Community is where we find our strength and where we share our hope. United is the way. Visit unitedway.org.
Welcome back to the Valley. Today, I am your host, Janet Michael. We are on the Zooms today with Les Sinclair. He is the communications and PR manager for the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. We have an ongoing series where we talk with Les. Some of the topics that we talk about have included their food is medicine, which we touched on in the first segment. And we also mentioned that May is Older Americans Month. And Les, you have programs at Blue Ridge Area Food Bank that are specifically designed for those seniors.
Yeah, the seniors are a particularly vulnerable situation because of their fixed income for the most part. And so when the economics in a community change, that can really put a strain on older Americans. So we've got a couple of things that we work with. One is these CSFP, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. We call them senior food boxes, CSFP. They are a USDA product. We pack them here in the Charlottesville branch, and then they end up all over our region from Winchester all the way down to Lynchburg. And those are, again, a USDA product. Someone has to qualify for those. They have to have the certain income requirements. And then they get that box of food. That box of food is a broad base of food. It's often a milk, a juice, cereal, spaghetti sauce, spaghetti noodles, those sorts of things. And it supports American farmers, and it supports the folks who need food assistance as well. And it is designed specifically for seniors. Now, we've also been providing folks who get that senior food box. We've been packing additional produce boxes to go along with that recently. So that's a big help, where they not only get their standard box of food, and it weighs, I think, about 30 pounds, that box of food, but we've also been adding an additional few pounds of produce as well. It's mixed produce. We purchase that and then provide it to them. And for folks who don't qualify for the CSFP box, the senior food box, we have our own program. We call them REACH boxes. They're essentially the same thing as the CSFP box, only it's not USDA food. It's food that we have purchased. And so we want to make sure that the older folks who need this food will have access to it. And so if they don't meet the requirements for a USDA box, then we will provide them food for sure.
I want to talk just a little bit longer about that USDA food, because there are a lot of different programs from the USDA that you are able to take advantage of. These senior food boxes is a really good example of that. And then there is the larger USDA, where you are able to get some of that produce and all of these other things that the federal government is buying from our local farmers. So when you mentioned earlier a trickle down effect, this is a big umbrella effect for a lot of people in our area. But when that starts to dry up, when those programs start getting cut, you have to make that up somewhere. But there are certain programs that get cut, other programs that don't get cut. It's also a very confusing process for you to figure out what you have access to and when.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and that is the nature of dealing with the government. And accounting for the USDA boxes is really important. We have to make sure that the person who signed up for that box gets that box. It is the government's food until the person who is supposed to get it gets it. That's the reality. And so we've got a lot of logistical information that we have to track to make sure that we're accounting for that. But it is true that USDA product has been down a lot, 30% for our TFAP food. And so that's a huge amount. This is food that comes in free and goes out free. So it's wonderful for the partners. So we are purchasing food to fill that gap. And typically the USDA food, because it's all American product and it's actually purchased to help level the cost. So there aren't wild swings in one sort of food or another. It keeps that food at an even keel, if you will. So the USDA has been doing that for years. That's its job. And they're able to purchase this excess and then provide it to food banks, which we then provide to our partners and our guests.
And when that goes away, if you have a family that depends on those things and then you suddenly don't have access to them, you either have to make up that difference or that family has to suffer in some way by not getting some of these products and maybe getting something else instead.
Yeah, and that's why it's so critical for the partner pantries to be able to order food and make sure that they can fill the gap between what they might have on hand from USDA or not. Because if they don't have it on hand, then people need that variety. And that is really one of the things that's really critical. We have a health person on staff who says that food that is not eaten is not nutritious. And that's so right. And people will say, well, beggars can't be choosers. We are. We are choosers. And if you don't like Brussels sprouts, you will not eat Brussels sprouts. So that nutrition does not get to you. And so that's why it's so important for folks to have choice on what they have and variety, so that when they go to a food pantry, that they get a variety of food that they will use.
Going back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about food is medicine, if you are given a food that is high in sodium, that is not healthy for you, and you eat it because, using that beggars can't be choosers mantra, then you're going to become sick. Your blood pressure is going to go up. You're going to have issues with your diabetes, which means another visit maybe to the ER, which then includes possibly a trip in an ambulance or a rescue squad. There are all of these other things things that play a role in not having access to something that you need, whether you enjoy eating it or not.
Yeah, this is really part of the whole food system, right? Because the food system connects to the health system, which those systems are huge. And that's why they're so important to pay attention to when things like the Farm Bill come up, because we want to make sure that we are supporting farmers. They must continue to do what they need to do. We also need the nutrition aspect of the Farm Bill to be passed along as well, so that people have access to the food that they need. And that includes free lunches, that includes this CSFP program, the purchasing of all this produce and proteins across the country. It supports farmers and food banks and people who need food. So the things like the Farm Bill are really, really important. And this is why we try to raise our hand occasionally and say, hey, pay attention to this issue. If it's something you believe needs to be voted on, make sure that you understand it.
When you talk about having to make up the difference, that means you're having to buy. Now, granted, you're able to buy truckloads of food, tractor trailers full of food, but that money still has to come from somewhere. And I assume it comes from people like me. I'm part of your supper club, as I have very proudly mentioned to you in the past, but it comes from those of us that can give $10 a month, $100 a month, or a corporate company that says, you know what, we think you're doing good work. Here's a check for $100,000. You got to find that money then to then use it to find the food. It's like a never ending circle.
Yeah, and we're not in a place where there are these huge corporate headquarters. So those checks for $100,000 are very, very rare. And I can tell you that most of our money, over 75% of it, comes from people like you, Janet, and people like me, people who just give what they can. And it's all added together. But you're 100% right in that we are buying more food. More and more of it is costing us more too. We're not immune to that. When the cost of food goes up, even though we're buying it at scale, we're still paying more for that food. And so it is even more critical for us to reach out to the community and say, hey, look, whatever you can give, if it's $5 or $10, that is fantastic, because that $5 or $10 is pooled with another couple thousand people who are giving $5 or $10. And we are exponential. So if it's $10, that's 30 meals. If there are 1,000 people giving $10, do the math on that. It's pretty good, and it really helps extend what we're able to buy and provide to our partners.
This conversation that we're having today is also somewhat timely because Stamp Out Hunger is coming up on Saturday, May 9th. What exactly is that, and what can I do to participate in it?
Stamp Out Hunger is really cool. This is put on by the Letter Carriers Association. So not the post office, but the letter carriers. The post office helps facilitate it, but this is an idea that was generated by your postal worker. And they're going to spend a lot of extra time on Saturday, May 9th, collecting food. You leave the food out by your mailbox on the 9th, and your letter carrier will pick it up. They'll deliver it to either a partner pantry or the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, and we'll redistribute that right in the community. It's our largest food drive of the year, and the postal workers are phenomenal for putting it on. They make a big day out of it. It's a lot of extra work for them. You can imagine having to get out of the truck, or if you're walking, to carry an extra 5, 10, 20 pounds of groceries back to the truck so that you can ship it back. And so they do a lot of running back and forth between the post office and their route. But it is wonderful, wonderful event. And folks can help by just leaving food out by the mailbox before 8 o'clock on Saturday, May 9th.
I always leave it out for the Boy Scouts and
Yep.
did not realize that the letter carriers also do that. But now that you're talking about it, I'm thinking, that's a very small vehicle our mail carrier drives. So by the time she's done with even our street, she might have to go back and empty it to start all over again.
Yeah, and I've been on the receiving end, the volunteer end of that. And so it really is about trying to help them unload that as quickly as possible so they can get back out there and deliver the mail. It makes for an extra long day for them, but it's wonderful that they do it.
And it's fantastic for anyone who says, I'd love to give some food, but I don't know where my pantry is. And we're going to talk about that in a second as we wrap up. Or I can't get it to where it needs to go. You just got to get it, in most cases, to the end of your driveway now. So on your regularly scheduled trip, maybe this weekend to the grocery store, pick up a couple of extra things and then just leave them at your mailbox.
Yeah, and don't include glass if possible, and make it non-perishable. We have gotten some rotisserie chickens in the past. We prefer not to get those. They will get discarded. But glass has a tendency to break and make a mess of everything else. Keep it to non-perishables in boxes or cans.
Not to mention that is torture, because when we have
Yeah.
gotten rotisserie chickens at Costco, it is the worst drive home ever because all you can do is smell that chicken and you can't eat it until you get home. So don't do
Yeah.
that.
And when the jar of pickles breaks and bursts all over everything, it is smelly.
So for someone listening today and they want to either do what we're talking about and pick up some things and leave it for the letter carriers on Saturday, May 9th, or they want to donate directly to a food pantry, they want to write you a check, they want to find a food pantry, all of that information is on your website.
Yeah, in fact, there's a component for the Stamp Out Hunger food drive. If you'd like to give in honor of the letter carrier, you can do that through them as well, and they will get credit for that. But the website is the best place to go. If you need to get help or give help, you can find it there on the website, right on the front page. brafb.org. It's the acronym for the food bank. Or just search for Blue Ridge Area Food Bank.
Thank you for this pretty enlightening conversation today. I always learn something every single time we have a conversation, which I still am on the fence about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Food banking is complex. There's no question about it. A lot of people think it's just food in, food out, but that's not the case.
I will be back tomorrow. We're going to get all the details for Mayfest happening in Strasburg on the show tomorrow for Shenandoah County's Tourism Tuesday. So meet me back here for that just a few minutes after noon.